Good afternoon, Year 5. It is day 13, and we will find out what happens with Miss Tennyson today. We're not too far near the end now, so I think, hopefully, we find out what happens soon. So chapter 2 of the Daisy Makes Okay. After lunch, while I was writing up my case notes on our midnight adventure and Daisy's deductions, the first formers filed away obediently behind Matron for their hour's shopping. An hour after that, the Marys waved to Daisy as they trotted off on their own shopping trip, and Daisy waved back like Queen. Even though she sent her minions off to work, Daisy was twitchy. What if Miss Tennyson decides to run away? She asked, pacing up and down the common room with a little crease appearing at the bridge of her nose. What if she bolts it in her car? She won't, I said automatically, although really she might have. Well done. She would have had the whole afternoon to get clear away. She might be missed on Saturday evening if there was a curfew at her lady's boarding house. She would certainly be missed at Sunday chapel, but she would have a start of hours and hours. Whenever girls run away, they do it Saturday because of that head start. One Saturday last year, Lavinia ran away. She had been missing for 6 hours before they found her on a bus to Rugby. It was nearly a record. I suppose, though, that the idea of running did not occur to Miss Tennyson. The Marys came back giddy with pride at having sighted her going into the Willow tea rooms. We were lucky it was November. When we leave school grounds, we are supposed to wear our uniforms. But of course, it is no good trying to go anywhere grown up wearing your pinafore and school tie, and the Willow is certainly grown up. In summer, you have to put on your mufti. We have mufti day, that's our then on uniform. Then your school clothes over the top, breathing in so Matron doesn't notice the difference. And as soon as you're out of school, wriggle out for your uniform. In winter, though, you can get away with just wearing your school coat and hat out of house and bundling them into a bush as soon as you're out of sight down the hill. Of course, once you've done that, you have to grit your teeth and freeze in your pullover, unless you have one of those ultra-fashionable lightweight silk mackintoshes. That day, Daisy wore her mac. I froze. We walked down the steep hill, slipping a bit on grummy old leaves, past pairs of second formers still straggling back up to house, and a bundled-up old lady with a bundly little dog. If it weren't for Miss Bell's murder, I suddenly realised Daisy and I might still be watching people like that lady, making little case notes about her height and her hair colour and suspicious actions. It all seemed rather silly now. The day was already beginning to fade away, and the electric lights illuminated the shop windows of Deep Dean Town as we crept into the most overgrown bit of the park. We shook out our plaits, pinned our hair up under our hats. Daisy had the most beautiful berry-coloured cloche that I covered painfully, and shoved our school coats and hats in the middle of a rhododendron bush. I felt awfully regretful as I did it. It was all very well deciding that you were going to sacrifice warmth for the good of detection, but taking off your coat outside in November is not amusing. Without our uniforms and with our hair up like grown-ups, there was no way to tell we were Deep Dean girls, but we still had to be careful in case we came across a master or mistress. Daisy was in high spirits. I've been working things out in my head, she said to me as we walked along arm in arm, and it's quite clear now. The motive, of course, was the deputy position. Tennyson wanted it, and thought that if she got Miss Bell out the way, Miss Griffin would give it to her instead. So Miss Tennyson lured the Bell into the gym balcony on Monday evening and shoved her over the side. She might have still been up on the balcony, but more probably she was down checking on the body when she heard you coming in, so she hid as quick as she could. You know, she knew you'd run for help, so once you'd gone, she dragged Miss Bell's body into the cupboard before you came back with me and Virginia. She waited, and when the coast was clear, she ran for Josie's spare keys. Or she might have got hold of them earlier in the day, I suppose, loaded Miss Bell onto the trolley from the gym cupboard and pushed her down the tunnel. She faked that resignation note from Miss Bell and left it on Miss Griffin's desk on Tuesday morning, then crept back at night to take the body right out of the school. She smashed the new wing corridor window on the way, of course. She is terribly clumsy. Then put the body in her car and drove it out to the woods to hide it for good. A series of vivid images went dancing through my mind. I saw Miss Tennyson, who was afraid of creepy-crawly creatures and very afraid of the dark, dragging Miss Bell's body into the storeroom and wheeling it down into the dark tunnel on her own. It simply did not seem possible. But what if Daisy was right? Daisy was still talking. You know, if her conscience hadn't begun to play up, we might never have properly suspected her. Not when Miss Parker seemed so promising. Really, Miss Tennyson managed a rather neat murder. She didn't make the mistake of trying to be too clever. It's always the clever ones who get found out easy as anything. My uncle says so. When Daisy laid it out like that, it all seemed to make sense. I wondered if I really were just jealous of Daisy. Was I being a bad member of the Detective Society and not agreeing with the president? I was very confused. Just then we reached the Willow tea rooms. Unlike Lyons, the tea shop where Daisy and I usually go, which had waxy, potted plants and stacks of brightly iced cakes displayed behind its enormous glass shop front. The Willow had little window panes shyly half covered with chintz curtains and a blue front door with twinkling bell. It is a polite place, all draped in cloth, and the dainty little sugared cakes, which arrive on matching blue and white pattern plates, are so small that you can hardly get a proper bite of them. I paused on the doorstep. Even after being friends with Daisy for nearly a year, I still felt a guilty lurch in my stomach whenever we go somewhere we're not allowed to. Daisy, though, was cool as a cucumber about it. Things like that don't worry her at all. She walked in as though she was going into the dining room at house. Miss Tennyson was sitting alone at a table near the door, her thick-waisted, out-of-fashion tweed coat on her lap and her ugly old flat-brimmed wool hat crumpled up next to her plate. The chair next to her was empty. When we came in, she started and half turned round on her seat. Her eyes flickered over us, but I could tell that she wasn't really seeing us at all. Daisy, very chic in her hat and lipstick, which Kitty had swapped for her for a diamond pin that looked very nearly real, managed to get us the table next to Miss Tennyson and ordered tea and a plate of sugar cakes. She was speaking loudly, but Miss Tennyson was so wrapped up in whatever her thoughts that she still did not notice us. I think Daisy was a bit cross about that. She made a great clattering of her spoon against her saucer, dropped her hat at Miss Tennyson's feet, and at last cleared her throat, turned round on her chair and said, "Miss Tennyson!" Miss Tennyson jumped as though someone had shot her. In chapter 3. Miss Tennyson's eyes flickered over Daisy's face, and she spoke in a small, creaky voice that was quite unlike her usual one. "Daisy, what are you doing here?" "I've come to see you," said Daisy meaningfully. "Whatever for?" asked Miss Tennyson. "Daisy, this is not a place for children. Does Matron know you're here?" Then she caught sight of me for the first time. "Hazel," she said blankly. "What is this?" "We're here," said Daisy, pausing to enjoy the moment, "because we know what you've done." Miss Tennyson's large bony hands pressing down tightly on the flowery tablecloth twitched. Then she clenched them together so hard her knuckles turned white. I could see the bones right through her skin. "Daisy," Miss Tennyson Whipson, "whatever do you mean?" "We know," said Daisy, speaking very quickly. "We know that you killed Miss Bell. We've seen the blood on the gym cupboard trolley, and your footprints in the tunnel, and the blood in your car, and then there's this." And she stuck out her hand and seized Miss Tennyson's left arm in its shapeless knitted pullover. Miss Tennyson yelped in pain, so the waitress turned and stared at our table curiously. The arm Daisy had taken hold of showed the faint lines of a bandage tied under Miss Tennyson's pullover. "No," I thought. "Oh, no." "The evidence against you is damning," continued Daisy. "I think she might have been drawing on her murder mysteries a little bit too heavily. And I haven't even shown you the best bit. I mean, the most important bit of evidence yet. Look!" She put her hand in her pocket, drew out the earring, and brandished it in front of Miss Tennyson's trembling face. Miss Tennyson burst into tears. She put her face into her hands and sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. My heart sank. I really had hoped that she would deny everything, but as a sign of guilt, this was unmistakable. I had to believe Daisy now. Through the sobbing, Miss Tennyson was trying to say something. "Sorry," we heard. "So sorry. I wish—" "At least she isn't denying it," whispered Daisy to me, go over our pillow-patterned plate of cakes. "I think this is going rather well, don't you?" I did not. At last Miss Tennyson sat up in her seat and stared at us both. She was looking extremely unlike her mistress by then. Her eyes were swollen and red, and her nose was red as well. I knew Daisy was thinking what an absolute fright she looked. "It's utter hell," Miss Tennyson said quietly. "I've been in hell the last few days. It's all been a blur. I can't think any more. How did you find out? No, don't tell me. I can't bear any more. I'm just so tired." It was the first time I'd ever heard a mistress swear. Oh, it said bloody tired. Missed that bit. It's silly, but until then I had simply assumed that they must not know how to. Miss Tennyson saying bloody gave me the most dreadful shock. Daisy, of course, was thinking more practically. "You must give yourself up," so she told Miss Tennyson sternly. "To the police, immediately. If you don't, we will." Miss Tennyson was squeezing and squeezing that old hat of hers, as though she was trying to crush all the life out of it, but her face had gone very calm. "I shall," she said. "There's nothing else to be done, is there? It's funny. I've read so much about guilt, and I always thought I'd understood it. But this, I can't bear it any more. It's as simple as that. Confessing is the only way to—" Suddenly the peaceful look fell off her face, and she looked terrified again. "But girls, you mustn't be mixed up in all of this. Don't tell anyone you were here. If I go to the police, they won't need your evidence. You won't be dragged into this. Do you promise?" "Yes," I said. "I promise." Then I looked at Daisy. She was obviously in the grip of a terrible personal struggle. "I promise," she said at last rather sulkily. "But if you don't go—" "I will," said Miss Tennyson sharply. "I will. Now leave, girls." "We shall," said Daisy. "And you may pay our bill, if you please." It was an utterly Daisy exit to make. In other circumstances I would have laughed, but something was niggling away at me. Why had Miss Tennyson been so desperate for us to leave? Was it simply that she did not want us getting mixed up with the police, or as she had said? Or, I remember how she had jumped round in her chair when we come in. Had she been waiting for someone? Was she meeting someone in the willow that she did not want us to know about? "Daisy," I said, turning to look at her as we stepped through the door outside, making the little bell chime as we did so. "Do you think—" And then the rest of the sentence was knocked right out of me as I thumped straight into someone coming the other way down the street. I yelped, and the other person exclaimed in annoyance. Then I gave a gasp of surprise. I was staring at the chestnut curls and regal nose of King Henry. As soon as she saw us, she spun on her heel and marched away up the street again, but I was sure that she had just been about to go into the willow. What if she was the person Miss Tennyson had been waiting for? And if she was, that meant that there was more than one to this mystery than Daisy's solution. I had been right all along. "Daisy," I said, "I think King Henry was about to go into the willow." "So?" asked Daisy. "So I think she was going to meet Miss Tennyson." "Daisy, I think she's mixed up in this somehow. There's something going on that we don't understand yet." "No, there isn't," snapped Daisy. "Don't be stupid, Hazel. We've solved the murder, and that's that. Leave off, can you?" "No, I can't," I said. "We haven't solved the murder. King Henry is as good as proves it, I tell you." "Oh, do be quiet," shouted Daisy. "I don't want to hear another word about it. I'm thinking, can't you see?" All I could see was that Daisy knew she had been wrong and was a terribly bad sport about it. "All right," I said, "don't be like that." "No, be like that." And I stormed back up to house without saying another word to her. Another argument. Do they think they're there? See how long this chapter is. I might get through this. Things were still cold between us when we arrived back at house. We were greeted by the Marys, who mobbed Daisy to ask if they had helped. "Wonderfully," said Daisy acidly, although the hat remained elusive. "You can carry my coat if you like." She flung her school coat and hat at the Marys, who bore them off to the cloakroom in raptures. I do not think they know what elusive meant. We were not talking, and for a while I was glad about it. I decided I was not going to speak to Daisy again until she admitted that I had been right all along. When Kitty, Beanie and Lavinia came back from town, they asked Daisy to make a fourth for cribbage, and I was left sitting alone in an armchair in the common room, writing my case notes and thinking about Daisy and me. It's difficult being best friends with someone, especially if that someone is Daisy Wells. She hates being wrong. It is infuriating. But every time I want to simply give up being the sensible one and shake her. I remember that before Daisy and I became friends, I was even worse off. You see, as I've already suggested, my time at Deepdene did not begin well. When I first came here, I raised my hand every time I knew an answer, just the way my father had taught me. In return, though, I got cold little looks from the other girls, who inched their chairs away from me as though I had an illness that might be catching. Girls who were meant to walk back to house with me would duck away and go running to where their friends were waiting, and when I sat down at the table for dinner, everyone pulled their trays back very slightly and bent their heads together, looking at me from out of the corner of their eyes. I thought I had to grin and bear it, but that was before I understood the secret side of Daisy. When I did, though, I realised that if the great Daisy Wells could play a role, I could play one too. I could behave like a don't-care girl on the outside, but inside I would still be me. The important thing about fitting in, I realised, was to look the part, and so I decided to do just that. Some things, of course, were beyond me. When I let it out of its plait, my hair would always fall straight down to my shoulders without fetching natural waves in it at all. And my eyes will always be brown instead of large and blue. So I saw that I would have a go about camouflaging myself in another way. In a quiet moment in the dorm one day, when most of the second form were at hockey practice and the rest were in common room, I filched Lavinia's penknife from her tuck box and made a careful cut in one of my shoelaces. I tugged it and wriggled it about until the end slapped off entirely, leaving behind a satisfying, authentic-looking frayed shoelace. Then, offering up a silent apology to my father for what I was about to do, I picked up my hockey stick, gripped it in both hands, and whacked it as hard as I could against the side of my school bag. It hit home with a surprisingly heavy smack, and the books inside the bag thumped about against each other under their canvas. I had the uncomforting feeling that I had just hit something that was alive. I managed one more thwack before I completely lost heart, and that was good enough. My books were now bent about as though I'd been mistreating them for months. I felt dreadfully guilty about the books, but I told myself firmly that it was worth it. The next morning, after Kitty and Lavinia ran off as usual and left me alone, I was careful to walk down to the school very slowly, scuffing my clean, shiny shoes along the dirty path with every step, and knocking the mud against the outside of my bag. By the time I arrived at the late Old Wing entrance, I was left with a perfectly weathered-looking bag and a pair of shoes with more mud than polish. At Bunbreak, I sat on the low wall next to the lawn and worked on my shoes a little bit more by kicking them against the crumbly stonework. This gave them some very artistic scratches, which I was rather pleased with. I rubbed my fingernails across them, smearing my fingers about to catch all the dirt I could, and then held my hands in front of me. They might, I thought, looking at the grime round my cuticles, almost be the hands of an English girl. My plan was going very well so far, and after lunch I decided to proceed with the next stage. Until then, I had answered every question as soon as I knew it, but now I resolved to take a leaf out of Daisy's book. In maths, I added a sum up wrong three times in a row, and in my French composition I told Mademoiselle that I had brown eyes and a long black horse. When I read this out, I got my first ever giggle from the second form, and after lessons, Lavinia walked all the way back up to house with me, silently, but without leaving me behind. The next day I found the book I had asked Kitty if I could borrow weeks before lying on my bed, and at Bunbreak, after I confused my tense 4 times in Latin, Beanie sympathetically gave me some of the spare Chelsea buns she'd found lying on the floor. I will stop there for today, actually. We'll hear more about how she got herself into a Deepdene gout, and we'll find out a little bit more what happened. Do you think Miss Tennyson was the murderer? We shall see.